Hey, let me tell you something that I know most founders feel, but don't want to admit. And you don't want to be the content in the marketing of your business. You don't want to be on camera every day. You don't want to perform on social media. You definitely don't want to chase likes, comments, and shares. And here's what I've learned from the founders that I meet at your level is that you really shouldn't have to. You've already earned trust the hard way through years of relationships, leadership, consistency, blood, sweat, tears, and the grind. The trust shouldn't require your constant performance to sustain it. But there's the problem. The expertise that you've built in your business, the way you think, the fundamentals, the frameworks that you use, the distinctions that you make that have made you so successful, they still primarily live in your head. And as long as it stays there, your business has a scaling problem, not a delegation problem, not a hiring or a team problem. You have what's called a knowledge transfer problem. Here's the pattern that I see consistently now over the last 15 years. Your team knows you're the expert, but they can't replicate how you think because they don't know how to access your strategic frameworks or the way you think about things. So, what happens in practice? They delay decisions because they're not sure how you'd approach it. They second guess the messaging in your marketing and in your branding because they don't want to get it wrong. They defer to you on client conversations because they lack the confidence in carrying the level of strategic thinking that you bring to the table. And every time that happens, you step back in. Not because they're incapable, because they don't have a system that allows them to channel your thinking with precision. The solution most people offer you in today's modern marketing world is to create more content, get on video, and build your personal brand. Have you heard that one before? But here's why that misses the mark, especially for founders at your stage. Content creation is built today on a performance model. You show up, you deliver, you post, you repeat. And for influencers and creators, that's perfectly fine. That's the game they signed up for. But you didn't build a multi-million dollar business because you wanted to become a content creator. You built it to solve problems at a high level in your industry, to lead, to scale your strategic value, to increase the value of your enterprise. And here's the distinction that most people miss. You don't need to perform as a CEO or founder, no matter what they're saying online today. You need to have your expertise extracted. Performance is for the audience. Extraction, hear me, is for the system. Let me explain the difference. Performance says go on camera and teach something valuable. Extraction says let's capture how you actually think about things when the stakes are really high. Performance asks, what do you want to say to the audience today? Extraction asks, how do you diagnose this problem? What is your framework that you're using when you said that? What distinctions matter most on this particular subject matter? Performance creates content that gets engagement, where extraction creates strategic assets your team can actually use. Here's why it matters. Founders who resist content creation aren't resistant to brand visibility. They're resistant to performing in front of the camera for the algorithm. But when you reframe it as extraction, capturing your expertise through structured conversations, that changes everything because you don't need to perform. You simply need to explain. And founders who don't perform will absolutely explain, especially when someone asks them the right questions. Most people make a mistake and think that extraction means simply recording yourself talking about your business. But that's not extraction, that's documentation. There's a place for that. But real extraction captures three specific layers. Layer number one, your strategic frameworks. These are the mental models that help you diagnose problems over the years, make decisions, and evaluate solutions. When a client comes to you with a challenge, you don't start at zero. You start with a framework, a way of thinking through that problem that they have from all of your years of experience. Maybe it's how you assess market positioning. Maybe it's how you evaluate growth opportunities. Maybe it's how you evaluate the manufacturing process. Maybe it's how you prioritize the use of resources. Whatever it is, that framework exists in your head. And right now, your team doesn't have access to it. When you extract your strategic frameworks, you're not creating content. You're documenting how you think so your team can operate at your level, even when you're not in the room. Layer two is your positioning arguments. These are the distinctions that you make that separate your business from your competition. Every founder has some level of point of view that has gotten them to where they are. They didn't get here overnight, and they didn't get here because it was easy. It's been years and years and years of pounding the pavement and beating on your craft. There's a belief about what matters most in your industry. There's a reason why you approach things different or better. You communicate this naturally when you're in the sales conversation, when you're in the client meeting, when you're in the strategic discussion, when you're negotiating with the vendors. But if that positioning only exists when you're speaking, it's not transferable. When you extract your positioning statements, the core distinctions that make your business unique, your team can now carry out those arguments with confidence. They stop saying, let me check with Mike. They stop saying, let me check with Sarah. Why? Because they understand the positioning at a strategic level now, not just at talking point level. Layer 3 is your belief system. And this truly is the hardest layer to articulate, but it is the most important. Your belief system is what drives trust in everything you've done in your business from zero to where you are right now. It's the principles that guide your work, the values that show up in how you make decisions. It's the reasons people choose to do business with you, which is beyond your product or service, right? The tangible things that they get. But when your prospects meet you, they pick up on this immediately. And if not, you've earned it over time. And this is the part where your team gets tripped up. They trust you, that is your prospects, your clients, and your vendors and people in your industry, because they understand what you believe. They understand what you stand for. They also understand why you believe it. But if your team can't articulate your belief system, if they can't represent those principles in their communication, then trust doesn't transfer and things start feeling like an uphill battle. When you extract your belief system, you're giving your team the foundation to build trust at scale. So here's what this might look like in practice. We don't ask people to sit down and write a 200-page book, which is what seems to be very popular online today, because you need to have a personal brand. You know why? Because you're never going to finish it. And even if you did, how would your team even use it? Instead, we propose that you orchestrate a structured conversation. Someone asks you the right questions. You answer the way you do naturally, clearly, confidently, and the same way you'd explain it to someone who was a colleague or a client. And from that conversation, we capture your thinking in a format that is repeatable and transferable. Now, don't get it twisted. We're talking about not word for word transcripts. No one's going to read all that. We're talking about strategic frameworks, positioning statements, and belief principles. It's not creating content for content's sake. It is strategic communication infrastructure. One founder we worked with, an advisor who has decades of experience, he's turned over a few companies, and almost everyone in his organization and that he advises has been super successful. He told me he despises being on camera. And he said his exact phrase was, I don't want to be the entertainment. I don't know if you can relate. But when we asked him 3 well-structured questions about how he evaluates the finances of a company, the financial health of a company, because part of his job is to help grow enterprise value, he delivered a 12-minute piece of insight that turned not only into a strategic framework, but became the root of his marketing and advertising campaign that he still now uses to this day. He didn't perform, he explained. And that's when your explanation becomes an asset. So here's the principle that sits underneath this that we believe in, that I've seen now in 34 years of growing businesses, now 15 years of helping companies grow, especially with those founders who believe that the business has grown and that people buy from who they know, like, and trust. And that is that trust scales when expertise is transferable. Right now, your expertise might be trapped in your head, might be trapped in your calendar, it might be trapped in all your years of experience. And it only shows up when you show up. It disappears, unfortunately, when you don't. And that's maybe why you're a little tired. But when your expertise is extracted, when your frameworks, your positioning, and your beliefs are codified, documented, and structured, your team can then deploy it independently and with confidence. They now have the strategic conversations with the clients. They now make the decisions that are aligned with your thinking. They can now communicate with authority because they're now operating from the same foundation that you operate from. That's how trust scales without requiring more of your time in your scaling venture. So here's how you know if extraction is what you need in your situation right now. Here are some examples. If your team is deferring strategic decisions because they're not sure how you would frame it, when you are constantly repeating yourself with the same explanations over and over again to different people, that was what happened to me in 2003 and 2004. Eventually, YouTube came along, and that was the first time that I started to codify this process in the business that I own back then. If clients are continuing to still ask to work with you specifically, even though you have a very highly capable and highly paid team, when the thought of building a personal brand or creating content every day feels exhausting, it feels resistant, because that's really not how you built the business in the first place. You didn't build a business to get here so you can become a content creator. Let's let the influencers handle that. And when you have decades of experience, but no systematic way to transfer that to the people that are around you, if any of those resonate, then you don't really have a content problem. You have just an extraction problem. And the good news is that's fixable. So here's what I want you to take away from this episode and this discussion today. And that is that extraction is not about being a content creator as a founder, CEO, or leader of your business. That's what the rest of the world on the internet wants to tell you have to do, whether it's on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Reels. It doesn't matter. Don't fall into the hype. What it is about strategically capturing your expertise and your intelligence. There are three layers to it. Number one, your frameworks. Number two, your positioning. And number three, your beliefs. And these are the things that actually drive what you've done to be successful and carries the authority in your business over to your team. And when those layers get extracted, when they get documented, when they get structured, your team can now operate at a level without requiring your presence in every conversation. You don't need to perform, you just need to explain. And when you approach it that way, extraction becomes natural and not forced. So, if you're following along in this series, in the next episode, what we're going to do is talk about visibility, because we're not interested here in merely extracting your expertise just to use it as an internal function. We're here to help it make sure it's growing your business. What we've learned over the years is that most founders at this stage are not invisible because they haven't grown a business. They're invisible in the places today that matter the most. Many of these places are online. It's not because they lack expertise. It's not because they lack experience. It's not because they lack credibility, but it's because the traditional visibility playbook that you're hearing about, that you're reading about, that you're seeing on the podcast, that you're watching on YouTube, that you're hearing at your industry conferences, that idea that you've got to post every day, you got to be everywhere, you got to chase this doggone algorithm. Listen, it wasn't built for people like you or me. We'll talk about what strategic visibility looks like when you're not interested in going viral. And if you found this conversation today helpful, we've put together a visual guide of this, what we call the Trust Flywheel Map. It'll show you how to extract, codify, and distribute all of this process together as a system. You can download that in the description below. And I just want to thank you for taking some time to listen today. I'll see you again soon.